Arch Manning. Touchdown, Mustangs.
We're not done yet, boys.
Hello and welcome into the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Yates, and joining me from beautiful and snowy Austin, Texas, is senior writer Mike Craven. Craven, is it still snowing out there for y'all like it is in North Texas area?
It depends on where the shade is. There's still some ice. Yesterday, I took care of the driveway. Reminded myself why I can't live in the North, as my grandfather says. You never have to shovel sun.
Yes, that's full on dad activities from you. How did you make out with your baby in the cold?
It was good. Power stayed on, so we were fine. Didn't get to leave the house for a few days, so got a little stir crazy inside with just the wife, the baby, and myself. But able to get to the HEB today, all good. Better than 2021. Yeah,
that's 100% true. And I know you're getting stir crazy because you probably can't talk football as much with your wife and your baby just yet. So that's why I'm here, Craven. We can talk football together. And I want to start off with the way too early power poll that you dropped last week. Got people fired up on our social media channels. That's exactly what the power poll is for, and we're going to unveil it one by one here and break it down, Craven. Let's start with number one, the Texas Longhorns. I made the joke during the Arkansas game this past year when Arch Manning was balling out. I said, all right, Arch Manning for Heisman next year for real this time. And I think it's actually going to come true. This is what we're going to do as media members, is put Texas number one again, put Arch Manning as the Heisman favorite again in the preseason. Why is this year going to be different, you think, Craven?
Well, because Arch Manning has experience this time. By the end of the year last year, Arch had a weird arc. At the beginning of the year, he was overrated. I feel like by the middle of the year, he was underrated. And at the end of the year, I think we had a good idea of what he is. And that's one of the best quarterbacks in college football that's returning in 2026. He has dual threat ability. He can run the rock. He scores touchdowns that way, over 30 total touchdowns, over 3,000 yards passing. What he did in the bowl game was excellent. So, experience is the number one trait required for success at quarterback. There are studies done that you got to start, I think it's like 30 times in college, before the NFL.
Quinn Ewers cited that.
And so I just think it's one of those deals where, he got his feet wet. He got some experience that he needed, and he's going to be a lot better than in 2026. And then you couple that with what they did in the transfer portal, what they always do in recruiting, bringing in Will Muschamp as the defensive coordinator. I think on paper, while I get the pushback of, Texas is always overrated and they're always number one, and look what happened last year. I just think on paper, there's not many arguments against the Longhorns being the top team in the state of Texas. And I look at these early power polls as just like context for expectations, so we can look back and see who overachieved, who underachieved, who, kind of ended up where we thought they were going to be. Going into the season, Texas is going to be the top-ranked team in the state, so the top-ranked team in the power poll.
And I think they should be top-ranked, too, because you talk about the expectation, and it feels from the outside looking in that Texas has pushed all their chips in the middle, right? It started when guys like Parker Livingston and DeAndre Moore are kind of curiously transferring, and people wonder why when they had good production the last year, and then you see, it's because they're saving this money for guys like Cam Coleman. I mean, we talked about it last episode, I know, but just to reiterate, what do you make of the strategy by the Texas Longhorns, and do you think it is the right one?
Yeah, I do think it's the right one. You want your money to be on the players that are in the two deep, that are playing. And if you are spending it on these true five-star true freshmen, that's great. But if they're not productive by the end of year one, you probably need to move on. And you saw Texas kind of clear some cap room, get a little top heavy with the roster. You see the success for Ole Miss and Oregon and Miami and Texas Tech, and that's how they've done the roster construction over the last 2 years. And so I think Texas is going to learn from that. They're still going to recruit at a high level from the prep ranks, but if you can go add superstars at wide receiver, a couple at running back, you get better on defense as well with the linebacker from Pitt. I think it's the smart play, and it puts Texas in position to compete right now.
What was the grade you gave for Texas for last season when we did our final grades this season? I remember I was harsher. You were about B- or B area. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I was about a B minus based on entering the season ranked number one and ending the season not even in the playoffs.
But you had said you would not give Sark that grade. You would have been harsher on Sark specifically. Do you think he has something to prove this upcoming year with the personnel they're now bringing in to help him out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pressure is on Steve Sarkisian. He's been there for long enough now. The expectation is, kind of him, Dan Lanning feel like the next one's up to go win a national championship, and Dan Lanning was closer this last year. And so I think a lot of what your expectations are for Texas in 2026 aren't about Arch Manning. It's about what you believe Steve Sarkisian is as a head coach. If you trust him, Texas can go win a national championship. They have the roster to do it. I completely understand the pushback that he hasn't gotten there. He hasn't gotten to a national championship game. He doesn't have a great record against the top ranked teams that he's played against. So, I don't know. Doubts may be the wrong word, but it takes a lot to go win a national championship. And it's still to be seen whether Texas's head coach can go do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I want to trust him, Craven, but then my mind does flash back to having the ball on the 1 yard line against Ohio State and running that toss sweep to Wisner instead of just punching it up the gut. And it goes to his lackluster record against top 10 teams. And I kind of subscribe to the Ari Wasserman belief of like, this is just how coaches progress through their careers. They knock on the door until they kick it down. But it definitely felt like last year was a bit of a step back. And maybe that step back is what allowed them to actually go all in for this year, and it'll be better for them in the long run. But I want to say I trust him, that he's a national championship coach. I think Texas has the right guy at the helm. Do you trust him right now, or do you still wait and see, and let's see if he can prove it more in the big games?
I'm worried about the stubbornness as a play caller. There hasn't been an offensive coordinator, head coach win a national championship game, I believe, since Jimbo Fisher with Jameis Winston at Florida State, over a decade ago. You have seen a lot of the big-time great head coaches, even Ryan Day, the year that Ohio State won a national championship. They give up play calling. He brings in Chip Kelly. They go win a national championship. In 2026, there are so many things, especially at the University of Texas, but just in general in college football, there are so many things that are requiring of your time and requiring of your effort, and you only are one person. And if you take the play calling as seriously as I know Sark does, that's a full-time job in itself. Being a head coach is probably 2 full-time jobs in itself, even if you don't play calling. So, I just think there's a lot on his plate. The recent history suggests that it's best to kind of give up play calling and focus on being the head coach. And, I think that is my biggest concern about Sark at Texas and reaching that ceiling and being a national champion is, can you do it as a play caller? And the last 12 to 15 years of college football would suggest that you can't.
But at least he fired the defensive coordinator, and that should help his offensive play calling, though, right?
Yeah, now he doesn't have to sit in defensive meetings, as he said. So, and that, that's another one, right? Like, you fire the guy on the side of the ball that's been better during your tenure. And that's putting more pressure on your plate, right? Like, if that defense takes a step back, Sarkisian's gonna eat that. Like, that's gonna be on his doorstep. So he's made some moves, and he's not made some moves that I think raise some eyebrows. The NFL is always kind of lingering in the background, and that's going to be a conversation. But as you said on the offset, Texas is all in. Their roster is as good as anybody's in the country. They should compete for an SEC championship. They should compete for a national championship. And when you're going into, I guess, what is it, year 5, year 6?
Yeah, year 5.
Wait,
is it year 5 or year 6?
I can't. I'm bad at math.
It's deep in his tenure, we should say.
Right, it's his team now, right? There's no like, well, these guys, or like, he's made a change at coordinator on defense. He's bucked against any pushback that he should give up play calling on offense. He's got Arch Manning as a quarterback with experience under his belt. They've spent more money than anybody in the transfer portal. Like, it is on you to go, win. And, I don't know if it's fair to judge a guy, but like, you win a national championship or bust, but they need to be in the playoffs and they need to be competing for it. And they need to go deep and win a couple of games there and beat some teams, like a Georgia, if they reach, the SEC championship game or something, like, win those big games. And I think those questions start to go away a little.
Well, Craven, I know another coach that had a lot of questions about his tenure coming into last season, and he answered the bell. That's Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. Last year, they go 12-2. They're the Big 12 champion outright. first conference championship since 1954, I believe, go to the college football playoff. Before we talk about Texas Tech, though, got to talk about our friends at Visit Lubbock. It's a proud partner of Dave Campbell's Texas Football and the Gambling Gauchos podcast. Love those guys. Rob Burrow over there. They do a great job. Visit Lubbock has put together their guide for all things to do, can't miss experiences, and where to stay if you're traveling into Lubbock for a game. Thank you again. Visit Lubbock and learn more. Head over to visitlubbock.com. And I know Texas Tech fans will be checking out Visit Lubbock when they go see their should be preseason Big 12 conference favorite. I know they don't do the media poll anymore in the Big 12 conference, Craven, but they're going to be the favorites. That's why they're number 2 on this list. My one question for Texas Tech, and it's for you too, Craven. What is your concern level that Texas Tech might fall into the Florida State trap? Because I know we questioned last year with them portaling so many defensive players and doing almost a wholesale change. I know the Jacob Rodriguez and the Ben Roberts, there were some incumbents there. But we wondered, we called them, it's a mercenary army a little bit. And to their credit, Joey McGuire was the perfect coach to get those guys to buy into the culture. But I've also seen programs like Florida State and Mike Norvell. One year they hit on all the transfer guys and they are left out of the college football playoff in a snub because Jordan Travis gets injured. And the next year they're 2-10. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to Texas Tech, but I'm wondering, is there any lingering concern for you in the back of your mind about this portal strategy?
Not really. Maybe there should be, but I trust James Blanchard. I trust Joey McGuire. I think they should be given the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. Like, they put together a hell of a roster in 2025 and ran ruckshot through the Big 12 when their quarterback was healthy. Beat Utah, beat BYU twice. They needed to go spend some money on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe if they hadn't gotten their quarterback target, I'd have a little bit more doubt, but I think that they're going to be better at quarterback. But they signed so many guys. I think it was like 9 or 10 guys on that defensive line. Romaine from Kansas State to play linebacker. So, I think for power poll purposes, I try to look at it as, who can win conference championships at the top, and Texas Tech is going to be the biggest favorite to win their conference in Power 4 football.
What do you think is one of the big questions they need to figure out over spring ball? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I have questions about the defense a bit. I think the offense is going to be better. I like their personnel, but how do you replace Jacob Rodriguez and David Bailey, who's an absolute cyborg out there? And I know they've got Mateen Ibaragba, who they are really high on and excited about, but Austin Romaine, you're really excited about the Kansas State transfer, but can these new transfer class group of guys be as good as Texas Tech's defense was last year?
Well, I guess my thing back would be do they need to be as good?
It's fair if the offense is better.
If the offense is better and the Big 12 is not, even if they take a step back defensively, they're still the best defense in the Big 12. And then if you look at their schedule, they don't play BYU, they don't play Utah.
Yeah, that schedule, by the way, is pretty soft right now. And I know it's not good to do that for Big 12 teams because you never know who's going to be the best, hence why they got rid of the conference media poll in the preseason. But as it stands in January, that schedule is soft.
For Visit Lubbock purposes, it's really nice. You get Houston, you get Arizona State, you get TCU to end it at home. There's going to be a team or two in the Big 12 that when we look back at it this time last, it's going to be like, wow, that was a much harder game than we thought. It's still that conference for everybody else than Texas Tech. So, I think they're an overwhelming favorite to win the conference. I think they got better at quarterback. I think they're going to be more than fine defensively. We're able to keep some guys, especially in the secondary. Ben Roberts at linebacker, AJ Holmes, a defensive tackle, is back. So, I think, maybe there's not a David Bailey, maybe there's not a Jacob Rodriguez, but I think the sum of the parts is still the best defense in the Big 12. Shill Wood's still the best defensive coordinator in the Big 12. For Texas Tech, it kind of feels like Clemson a decade ago, where it's like the question isn't can they win the ACC? Obviously they're the favorite to win the ACC. Can they start beating the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Georgias? And Clemson figured out a way to do that. For Texas Tech, the ceiling is now, what can you do in the playoffs? Not get to the playoffs. They should be expected to get to the playoffs. It's can you, when you face an Oregon or a Texas or a Miami or a Georgia or whoever that is going to be next year, can you do better than 23-0? And I think offensively they did enough through the portal and what they have coming back where that unit should stand a better chance.
It's so interesting how we always talk about how quickly fan bases' expectations change. And it's a little similar to Texas State in the first year under G.J. Kinney 3 years ago, where I was covering the First Responders Bowl. It's their first bowl win as an FBS team, and they literally drink SMU Stadium dry because they were partying so hard. And now 3 years in, they're winning. They've won 3 straight bowl games, and everyone's like, okay, what's next? I could see Texas Tech fans, maybe not to that same degree, but getting to the college football playoff is now almost expected. Is that even fair to say? If for a program that hadn't won an outright conference championship since 1954, now winning the Big 12 is like a good year instead of, oh my God, amazing year. And getting to the college football playoff is a good year instead of, oh my God, amazing year. They need to do better than 23-0 against Oregon.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 months ago, my daughter was waking up multiple times during the night, and I was praying to anyone who would listen that if she would just wake up one time during the night, I'd be a happy camper. And then for like the last month, she's been sleeping through the night. And then, now when she wakes up like once, it's like, what in the world is going on? This is awful, right? Like your expectations just changed based on what's happened most recently. And I don't think it's unfair to expect Texas Tech to make the college football playoff. Like that's going to be like last year going into the season, even with all the portal activity and all the money spent, guys like Cody Campbell, Joey McGuire, the company line was, we just need to get ourselves to Arlington. If we can be in the Big 12 championship game, anything can happen. If we lose that one, like at least that's proof of concept. Well, check, right? You get to Arlington, you win that game in dominant fashion. Well, the new expectation is like that is what you do. Like there's no Texas, there's no Oklahoma. Like you are the top dog, you are the big spender in the Big 12, you are the overwhelming favorite. If they get to the playoff, it's a successful season. If they don't, it's an unsuccessful season. And that's just the binary way to judge Texas Tech now. Like I think it's completely fair to look at it with that line for Tech.
Well, another team with college football playoff expectations after making it for the first time last year, that's Texas A&M. And before we talk about the Aggies, let's talk about Visit College Station. Guys, love Texas, love football. I do. Then you'll love College Station, home of the Aggies, and so much more. Come eat, play, relax, and say howdy to one heck of a good time. Plan your trip at visitcollegestation.com. And Craven, I think this gives us a good opportunity to talk about the story I just wrote on Monday. I was covering the East-West Shrine Bowl. There was a lot of Texas A&M players, 5 to be exact, and I wanted to find out how Mike Elko was able to take a Texas A&M program that kind of perpetually underachieved, seemed to have all the ingredients but could never bake the cake, and then they were the group to get over that hump and get to the college football playoff. And my hope was that now that they were off Texas A&M, off to the NFL, kind of in between teams, they'd be a little more open to kind of share how the cake was baked a little bit, how the sausage was made, and they did that. They told some really great stories, so go check out the story at texasfootball.com. But what did you think of what A&M players had to say about Mike Elko and how they were able to make the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think it's in line with everything you hear covering the team. Like Elko just brought some maturity and some accountability to the program that needed it. Like talent was never the problem in College Station, at least over the last 10 years. Like the classes that Jimbo was bringing in, like as York said in your story, probably not the most talented A&M team that he's been a part of, but the one that was the most close knit. And that matters in sports. I think especially in college football right now with the revenue share and the NIL and the transfer portal, there's a lot of talk about how like this is a mercenary sport now. But even within that, like this is still football. And football is it's 11 on 11. There's a lot of guys that play. Like it is the most like brotherhood kind of cliche sport that there exists. And you still need that to get through the tough times. And especially in a conference like the SEC where everything is so evenly balanced and you're going to have some ups, you're going to have some downs. I think Elko has just kind of built a culture there and built an identity within the locker room and a standard within the locker room that was needed and that was required. And it's allowed the talent to kind of shine through.
And I kind of took the angle in that story of Torian York is the embodiment of the changed A&M. And from my experience covering the state of Texas, it always felt like A&M was a program trying to build from the outside in the sense of let's make this badass stadium. we're signing the #1 recruiting class and going to tell everybody about it. We're going to make a fake national championship plaque for Jimbo because just hiring a national champion coach to come to Texas A&M, that's like half the battle, right? That, you know, and when it's really not even winning half the battle, they acted like it was winning the war, really, when they had so much more work to do. And then they changed this program like Torian York, who did 521 sit-ups every day in the dark, basically, because he heard an offhand comment at a college recruiting visit that he was a little soft in the core and might need to switch to the defensive end spot instead of linebacker.
Yeah, I think Torian York, Trey Zune, like a lot of those guys, Marjorie Reed Adams, I feel like brought some of that mentality in. Like not the biggest superstars coming out of college. You know, York was about to go to Baylor, or maybe even follow Elko to Duke when he was the head coach there. Like, you know, A&M only gets York because Anthony Hill flips to Texas, and then York gets the offer from A&M when Elko becomes, you know, and so yeah, I think, you know, this happened with Sark too. You like look at that first semifinal team that played against Washington in the Sugar Bowl. You know, a lot of those guys weren't like the superstars that Texas assigned. It's the 3 stars that you kind of find diamonds in the rough and you polish them up and you figure it out. But I think what goes on inside the locker room is as important as the talent on the football team. And Texas A&M should have both again going into next year. Like they have to replace a decent amount of guys like York, like Zune, like Amars Reed Adams, like some of the leaders of that football team. But you bring back a quarterback that started 3 years, Mario Craver, one of the best wide receivers in the country. You pair him with an Isaiah Horton that you pick up from Alabama in the transfer portal. Running back room should be really good. Hopefully you get Le'Veon Moss to be healthy for a full season there. So you know, you expect the run defense to get better. And so, you know, I think A&M, to me, it's the schedule. And like, you know, they got some schedule luck last year. I don't think there's any way around that. And so it's going to be a tougher road this year. But I think this is going to be Elko's best team, and it should be, right? Like each year, as you kind of progress as a head coach into like year 3, year 4, it should start looking more and more like your football team. Fascinated with what A&M is going to be in 2026.
Well, so the top 3 teams on the power poll, Craven, Texas at #1, Texas Tech #2, Texas A&M #3, and that's exactly how Vegas has it, the DraftKings Sportsbook. The odds to win the college football playoff national championship, it is Texas plus 750, Texas Tech plus 1,400, and Texas A&M plus 1,600. I believe Texas is like tied 2 right now. What bet would you take right now as a gambling man yourself?
I would take Texas Tech.
All right.
Because I at least feel like I give myself a chance to be alive come December. Like
for sure.
Of those 3 teams, the one, in my opinion, most likely to reach the college football playoff is Texas Tech because of their schedule. They don't play Ohio State in non-con like Texas does, and then having to go through the SEC schedule. And then you look at A&M's schedule. They got Arizona State in non-conference, and you're at LSU, you're at Alabama, you're at Oklahoma, you get Tennessee, Texas at home. So that's a tough schedule. And if you go 9-3, 8-4, you're not making the college football playoff, even if you're better than the Big 12 champion that goes 11-1, 12-0, just because of who you're playing. So if I'm betting on a future right now here in January, I think I'm taking the team that at least lets my ticket be alive come January 1. I think Texas Tech's going to win the Big 12. They're probably going to get another bye and be playing in the quarterfinals on January 1st. You know, I'll take those odds.
It's a similar strategy to when you're filling out the March Madness bracket and you pick a 1 seed because like they're going to win the first 2 rounds, bar none, right? Like I can breathe easy until the Elite 8 round, most likely. Now I know Texas Tech is not a 1 seed odd here, but given their conference and the level we think they are above that, you're not delaying it, but you're saying they'll be alive down the road. So I can breathe easy for the first few weeks. I like that strategy, Craven, because I usually go for a 3 seed and just put it all on the line. And they usually lose first round. That's more my speed.
I mean, because like look at 2025. Like I can hear the argument that if Texas and Texas Tech play January 1st on a neutral site field, like that Texas is the favorite and the Longhorns could win that football game. I'm not saying that they would, but I can definitely understand the argument that they could. But they had to play Ohio State, and they had to play Georgia, and they had to play A&M, and they have to play Oklahoma, and they got to play Vanderbilt, and you go on the road to Florida. Well, like that's still true in 2026. Like Texas can be one of the top 5 teams in the country in terms of just like on the field potential. But they might be 9-3 again. They play Ohio State. They go to Tennessee. You got Oklahoma. You got Ole Miss at home. You go to LSU, and then you got Texas A&M in Kyle Field. So I think it's just more likely that A&M or Texas or both go 9-3 and don't get into the playoff, whereas Texas Tech does what it did last year, 11-1 in the regular season. You make up for that by winning the Big 12 championship. And my betting ticket still, like, I can still have a rooting interest come December. Although if I am just like talking to you on who I think who has the best chance of winning the national championship, I think Texas's ceiling is the highest for sure.
Craven, I'm drinking the burnt orange Kool-Aid. I'm slamming this Texas line. And look, I last year jumped off the Texas bandwagon at the very last second. I all aboard the Texas train, and then I just bailed and barrel rolled off the side of the hill and said they were actually going to go under 9 wins. But this year, it's different. I get fired up listening to you talk about Texas being number 1 in the power poll as I see their recruiting strategy, bringing in Cam Coleman. I agree with you. Arch became underrated at the end of the season. And I think I was mocking people who said at the end of last year that Arch Manning is going to win the Heisman next year, book it. But now I'm for real thinking that.
Yeah, I don't think it. I mean, he's probably going to be the betting or right behind Dante Moore.
True.
As the betting favorite for a Heisman. Julian Sayan's in that mix. So yeah, I mean, I think Texas's ceiling is the highest. Their schedule also offers more pitfalls than a Texas Tech. And so I think Tech is the safer bet. But I do think Texas has the best chance of winning a national championship game, and Vegas agrees.
Not to derail this podcast, but what did you think about Dante Moore deciding to stay at Oregon because the New York Jets were lurking in the top 3 picks?
If that's the only reason I squint my eyes at it, right? Because like, if you're an elite prospect, that type of quarterback, like, shouldn't you be able to go to the Jets and win? I don't know if that franchise is like doomed. Although I'm not the hugest NFL fan, so maybe that's an ownership GM thing that you can't fix as a quarterback.
And also, Sam Darnold was on the Jets and flamed out. Everyone thought his career was over, and now he's in the Super Bowl. So that's
true, but like Seattle's got a great defense. Like, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's in a silo in that kind of way. But I do like going back on the experience thing. I think Dante Moore has proven throughout his career that he's willing to be patient. You know, he transferred to Oregon, waiting a year. You know, he knew he wasn't going to play when he first got there with Dylan Gabriel there, and he sat and he learned. You know, he's not doing it for free. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, he's obviously going to the NFL, but he's going to make $3-4 million to be the king on campus and live in Oregon and get the Nike money. And I mean, there's worse things to do as you're getting better. What I think of it, this is a Texas podcast, so it's probably getting off the rails here. But if I'm an Oregon fan, I'm excited because it means that he trusts Drew Maringer. You know, like when your offensive coordinator leaves, and you kind of assume the quarterback will as well, but him sticking around, I think shows that he has, some faith in what Oregon's going to be, even without Will Stein as the helm at the helm calling plays. And
again, the view I took on it of he decided to stay in college because the New York Jets were a top 3 pick is probably too simplistic. But if that was one of the reasons, I question that too, because you're saying, I can't even fix the New York Jets. I don't want to go to that dysfunctional organization. Well, then wouldn't they be a top 3 pick next year as well? And if you're an alpha dog, you're going to be a top 3 pick as well next year too. So it's just delaying. It's going to happen again next year.
Yeah, the Jets aren't going anywhere. From the top of the draft. So yeah, it's it's be interesting to see how it shakes out.
For sure. Okay. Speaking of another guy who had to be patient throughout his career and maybe could be playing themselves into a first-round NFL draft pick. I'm not trying to get too ahead of my skis here, Craven, but Connor Wegman at Houston, anyone going to get behind this right here? He had a great year last year. Houston went 10 wins. They beat LSU in the Alma Bowl, right? It was Alma Bowl, not the Texas Bowl. I get those mixed up. Alma Bowl.
No, it was the Texas Bowl.
Texas Bowl. Crap.
Yeah, it was in Houston against LSU. For the power poll, 4, 5, 6, you could put them in any order, and I'm not going to argue with you. That's Houston, SMU, TCU. I think there's a clear, I kind of think of this as tiers. You got to put them in order because that's the exercise. But I think of these as tiers. Like tier 1 to me is Texas, Texas Tech, and Texas A&M. I think those are conference championship contenders. Could possibly win the national championship if things go right. the expectation is to get into the college football playoff. Next is, can these guys be dark horses to win their conference? I think Houston can do that in the Big 12. I think SMU can do that in the ACC. I think TCU, maybe to a lesser extent, can do that in the Big 12 as well. I just trust Willie Fritz. They have their quarterback coming back. I like what they were able to keep on the defensive side of the ball with Khalil Afau and Will James, Kentrell Webb, those kind of guys. The offensive line got a lot better through the portal. Shadre Hurst is on a lot of way too early All-American teams, and you have him stepping in at guard from Tulane to be a starter. At running back, you get Mekhi Hughes that he had a lot of success with at Tulane, so that gives you some upside there. The schedule is harder. It's a lot like A&M, right? The schedule is a lot harder going into this year, at least on paper. So maybe Houston has a tougher road to get back to 10 wins. But I trust Willie Fritz. I like what Connor Wigman's become at quarterback. And I think Wes Fritz and the personnel staff do a great job. So after winning 10 games, I kind of flipped a coin between Houston, SMU, and TCU and put Houston at 4.
What do you think the most interesting storyline is coming out of Houston for a head coach, Willie Fritz, who I think prides himself on not being interesting, although we agree, Craven, that he is a very interesting man, but he is very football coach, just do the fundamentals type of guy like that. What's the most interesting storyline here?
That's a good question. I guess to me, it's just what is the ceiling for the Houston program? Mm-hmm. Keyshawn Henderson, a 5-star, signed with Houston. If you look at the last Rivals, 2026, recruit, Houston signed the best player in the state. But what else do they do? Is there still money in the banana stand to keep that going and to sign another elite class and another elite class after that, or go portal hunting in a big time way to keep up with the Texas Tech, to keep up with BYU? What does Houston want to be as a program? And that's not a Willie Fritz question. That's probably a donor question. What is Tillman Fertitta and some of the rich guys in Houston? What do they think the ceiling is for the Cougars? The 10-win season last year can be a high water mark, or it could be the start of a real trend of Houston kind of getting into major. We've seen SMU break through. We've seen Tech break through. We've seen TCU break through. 5 of the 7 Power 4 teams that we cover have been in the playoffs since 2021. Mm-hmm. Houston and Baylor are the last ones that haven't. Houston obviously hasn't been Power 4 the whole time, but their upside is there. And so I guess my interesting storyline for Houston is just how do they follow up year 2 and how do they keep building the momentum? Because in theory, if Henderson is what they expect him to be, they could be competing for Big 12 championships and in the national championship running here in a year or 2.
Yeah, because whose donors are all in? That's SMU, the Mustangs. They had a 9-win season last year. Quietly, I think one of the most consistent Power 4 teams in the nation. Craven, that's not crazy of me to say, right? They went to the ACC championship game last year. This year had 9 wins. They've lost 1 conference game in the last 3 years. Is that right? Wake Forest? Actually, no, Cal, 2. They've lost 2 conference games in the last 3 years.
Yeah, they've won 31 games over the last 3 years and are 20-2 in conference play.
Pretty good.
During that time. And so, they've already beaten Miami. They've beaten Florida State. They've beaten Clemson. So you like that in terms of trajectory.
You like that? You like that? Sorry, Kirk Cousins impression.
You got a lot of travel you got to deal with. This year, I did the math the other day. I don't have it right in front of me. I should. I think their average. They have 4 conference road games: Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, Stanford. The average travel there is 1,233 miles for each of those games. So, I think the road trips in these expanded conferences have proven to be difficult. They lose at Cal last year at the end of the year with the chance to go play in the ACC championship game. But schedule shakes out pretty good. They also have a 3-year starting quarterback with Kevin Jennings. Keeping him there was a big-time portal win. You feel the offense is going to score points with Lashley calling plays. They're going to have to retool the defense, specifically the defensive line and that secondary. Scott Simons we both really like, and I think that's going to be the fulcrum for SMU this year. Is that if that defense can be closer to what it was in 24, they got a chance to compete in the ACC championship. If it is what it is last year, they just got to hope that it's a jumbled mess again.
Well, and they're replacing the entire starting defensive line and guys in the back end like Isaiah Nokobia and Ahmad Moses. That scares me a little bit, Craven. But like you said, in Scott Simons we trust. What's your read on the defense right now, 1,000-foot view in January.
Yeah, I mean, they think they're going to be better at corner. It's kind of a addition by subtraction there. Like they just weren't good in coverage, even with those safeties. But yeah, I just think Simons is going to figure out a way to get pressure. He was able to do that last year and kind of pressure burst pipes. They need to get probably more consistent, a little bit more disciplined. Like they've led the country in penalty yardage over the last 2 years, and so they need to get better at that. But you don't play Miami, you don't play Clemson. You get Florida State in week 1 on the road on a Monday night. Like that's going to be a big time game right there. So I think the offense is going to score a lot of points. Again, I mean, it's January 28th. I have no idea how good or not good the SMU defense is going to be. But that's going to be the key to the season is how good they end up being or not end up being.
You mentioned the ACC travel times, and I don't know, Craven, you might have made this joke before, but like it feels like the Nate Bargatze, George Washington sketch where, they're all sitting by the campfire and saying, and we'll have the Atlantic Coast Conference. And then they say, so surely all the teams will be on the Atlantic Coast. And he goes, no, actually, it'll be in Dallas and Stanford on the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, I mean, they go to upstate New York. They go to Florida. They go to the Pacific Ocean. And those are all conference games.
Hilarious. I love it. I don't love it, but that's college football today. Okay, in that last tier of dark horses to win their conference championship, you got TCU, the Horned Frogs, a 9-win team last year. My big question here is the combo of UConn offensive coordinator Gordon Samus and Harvard quarterback Jaden Craig going to have better results than Kendall Briles and Josh Hoover?
Yeah, you probably take a step back a little bit at quarterback. Like you cannot, I know Josh Hoover turns the ball over too much, but that's also a function of TCU being like 13th in rushing last year and 15th in the conference in rushing the year before that. Mm-hmm. Like Colorado is the only team that's been behind them in both of the last 2 years in terms of rushing yards per attempt. So that put a lot on Josh Hoover. He turned the ball over too much, but you can't convince me that the guy that Kirk Cignetti wants to be the next quarterback at Indiana is somehow like a value loss. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you get better somehow with that guy leaving, although I do like Jaden Craig, really good player at Harvard, all-time leading passer for that school. I think that's fine. But I think you might take an even bigger step forward than what you take a step back at offensive coordinator. I'm not a Kendall Briles guy, have not been a Kendall Briles guy, wasn't when he first hired there. I just don't think it ever worked. I don't think it ever fit with what Sonny wants to do and how they recruit. He was supposed to continue running the ball, but the last time TCU was like elite and competing for championships is when they had Kendre Miller, Max Duggan, and they were running the rock. And they just weren't able to do that under Briles. Gordon Sam is kind of an old school air raid guy, kind of does what Sonny likes to do. Maybe they're going to throw it around even more under them. But I think, he's an offensive line coach by trade. I think they're going to get more physical up front. I think they're going to find more balance. And I think the TCU defense is going to be really solid, especially, in the front seven. Think they're going to be good there. So, there's always a team that kind of pops up in the Big 12. Last year it was Houston. You could make an argument that TCU is just as in the running to, they've won 9 games back-to-back seasons, so that hasn't been too far out of there. They just have to win the close ones and not play bad in the fourth quarter. Maybe some new voices and they change out strength and conditioning coach, new offensive line coach, new coordinator, like all the places where like the toughness and the character of your football team is built. It's kind of a new wave there. And I think they're positive changes for TCU.
So Houston, SMU, TCU are kind of dark horse conference championship contenders. What does that make Baylor, who comes in at number 7 on the power poll, the last Power 4 team on the power poll?
Yeah, I think Baylor's the wild card in the Power 4 ranks for here in the state of Texas and probably in the Big 12 as well. And in your opinion, it's, I said this line last year about Marcel Reed and Texas A&M. Your opinion about Baylor going into 2026 is your opinion about DJ Lagway. If you think he can become the former 5-star big-time quarterback from Willis, Texas, Mr. Texas football under Jake Spavital, Baylor's got a chance to be the surprise team in the Big 12, have an 8 or 9, 10-win season, save Dave Aranda's job yet again. If you think Lagway is just a solid player that's going to be an average Big 12 quarterback, it's just where does the jump come from? The offense was always good. If he's not a gain onto Sawyer Robertson and you lose Josh Cameron at wide receiver, Bryson Washington at running back, Colton Price along the offensive line, you're asking Clanderman, the new defensive coordinator, and that unit to get leaps and bounds better. And I don't know if you can do that in 1 year if you're not going to spend the way Texas Tech does on the portal.
Okay, let's now rank the group of 6 teams and finishing out the power poll here, 8 through 13. And Craven, I want to take this opportunity to look at their transfer portal classes a little bit more, because you got a series coming out on TexasFootball.com grading the G6 transfer classes. I'm going to start with number 8 on the power poll, the highest ranked group of 6 team. It's Texas State, 3 straight winning seasons, 3 straight bowl games under G.J. Kinney. They're also keeping Brad Jackson at QB, wide receiver Bo Sparks. I think in the group of 6 ranks, a lot of times the biggest wins in the portal is just who you can retain, right, and stay on your team. But what do you make of the vibes around Texas State, and what do you think about their general portal strategy as well?
Yeah, in terms of the G6 coaches that we cover, I probably trust G.J. Kinney the most in terms of talent evaluation. Mm-hmm. Like, if Kinney didn't want to be a head coach, he could be a GM in the NFL. Like, he loves that part of the game. I'm always gonna, he knows more about it than I do, right? So I'm always gonna trust his evaluation. They bring in 3 offensive linemen. They're all from the P4 ranks, kind of spinning down. Defensively with a new coordinator, what's the system going to be? How do those pieces fit? Like, that's something that even the coaching staff doesn't know and won't know until probably the summer and into early fall camp. So there's a lot of question marks there, but they've proven that they can find the P4 guys that can kind of come down and they can get more out of with more snaps. And they've also been really good as a staff finding the FCS and Division II talent and kind of the lower talent that's been productive coming up. And they've continued with that trend. I think that it's a good balance there with the portal class. But as you mentioned, the reason Texas State is the highest ranked team, G5 team, G6 team in the power poll is because they were able to retain on the offensive side of the ball. Brad Jackson, Chris Don, Bo Sparks, those are 3 of the best offensive players in the Pac-12. The level of competition obviously steps up for Texas State, but they're going to be able to score points. It's going to come down to if they can prevent them.
Doesn't Texas State not even do spring ball? They do like spring drills, basically. I'm just thinking of that because you're saying you're not sure how all the pieces are going to fit, and they're not going to be sure until the summer and the fall.
Yeah, maybe the second transfer portal not being there, quote unquote, helps with that. But like last year, I remember talking to Kenny during the magazine thing, and they didn't do third down situational stuff. They didn't do goal line situational stuff. Like, they didn't get too far into the playbook, into the scheme. They just worked on basic stuff, and it was because why are you going to spend 15 practices with guys that may or may not be there? And so. I don't know. It'll be, that's something I'm going to ask when I'm on the spring tour this year is without the spring transfer window, does that bring back spring ball in a more historic way or the way that, traditionally we look at spring ball? I don't really know the answer to that question. But I think I know more about Texas State's roster than I do any of the other G6 programs in the state. What I don't know is how it stacks up with the new look Pac-12. Like, they might be the best team in the G6, but if the Pac-12 is really good this year, who knows what the record looks like.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take it to Texas State's rival, UTSA. They come in at number 9 on your power poll, Craven. I was wondering as I'm doing research for this pod, man, UTSA is 8-8 in conference play since the start of 2024, as you pointed out in your power poll. I mean, has the Jeff Traylor era stagnated, do you think, and how can it get unstuck?
Well, I think it kind of regressed to the mean, right? Like, you're UTSA, you're not Ohio State or Georgia. Like, the idea that you're just going to like reload and not take a drop off when you lose a Frank Harris, Rashad Wisdom, Spencer Beerford, Tariq Woolen, like guys that are going to be, that have played in Super Bowls, that have played in NFL football, like the portal, revenue share, like all that stuff is new from when they were like riding the highs of winning 10 plus games and winning back-to-back Conference USA championships. So some of it is probably readjusting expectations and what the ceiling is at UTSA and what life is as a G6 program right now. That said, they have to just get better on the road. Like, I mean, I don't know. We've just beaten this to death. Like, second halves on the road have really been the undoing of UTSA the last couple of years. They've proven the ceiling's still there to compete with the top of the league. Like, they've beaten Memphis, they've beaten Tulane this year. But there was only 2 teams in the state that beat teams that went to the college football playoff. One of them was UTSA. And so they can still do it. They can still play at those levels. You keep Owen McCown. I think they kept a lot of their pieces along the offensive line. It's just a different way to build a roster than the way that UTSA was when Jeff Traylor got there. And he's had to adjust, and the coaching staff has had to adjust. I think this is probably their best overall portal class. Getting Brandon High back from Cal, I think, is big. I like what they did at wide receiver and along the trenches of the defensive line. Xavier Walton from Angelo State, I think, is an underrated player, an All-American at the D2 level, is going to walk in and be a pretty good safety. I think he's going to remind people of Rashad Wisdom. So I think defensively they got better. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, and we'll see how that works with Owen McCown. But the American is stacked, probably the best G6 conference in the country. Maybe the Pac-12 has an argument for that, and it's going to be won or lost in the small margins on the road.
Owen McCown's back, and you said you like the wide receivers that they brought in. Who are those wide receivers? Because my opinion was, hey, Owen McCown's back, but who's he going to throw to? Because McEwen's off to Ohio State. The tight ends, Houston Thomas and Patrick Overmeyer, have both transferred out.
Yeah, so they brought in a couple tight ends, Miles Campbell and then Brandon Young Jr. from North Texas, who they played against. So they probably have a good idea of what's going on there. And then wide receiver, they bring in TJ West from Texas Tech, who, a lot of upside. Same as James Madison, the second from Missouri. Those are two P4 guys that just need more snaps, that were, higher rated recruits than what UTSA would be able to get from the high school ranks. You just hope that you're able to turn them, into productive players. Zon Coakley from App State is a player with a little bit more production. But then you still have David Amador on campus. I think he's going to be probably wide receiver one. I think the new offensive coordinator in that system, it's going to be a spread the ball around, throw it to the open guy, not so much lean on, just one or two guys and have that. But they don't have Joshua Cephas and Zachary Franklin and those kind of JT Clark and those guys. But I think with Owen McCown and that run game behind the offensive line, I still think it's going to be a run-first team with Owen McCown and the wide receivers kind of being secondary.
All right, we're on to the double digits now. Coming in at number 10 is North Texas, the Mean Green, who their entire team from last year is basically gone to Oklahoma State with Eric Morris. But now it feels like, Craven, you're really high on Neil Brown so far and the job he's doing in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's going to be a completely reworked roster. Over 50 guys in the transfer portal. I'd imagine it's going to be over 30 high school recruits. It's going to be an entirely new roster. But, from what they've lost and what you can expect for a first-year coach to do, hit the ground running, I think he's hit home runs with his hires. I think he's done as well as you could in the transfer portal. They brought in some star power from the P4 ranks that I'm sure that they have some relationships with. They found some smaller school guys with a ton of production that they're going to give a chance to, which has worked really well for North Texas in the past with especially at the skill positions. And so, who knows? You bring in 90 new faces and a whole new coaching staff. Who the hell knows what year one is going to be? But there hasn't been anything so far that raises your eyebrows in terms of a negative. I think the hires have been good. The portal class has been good. They brought in a lot of, people from the DFW area, whether it be on the coaching staff or through the portal or through the high school ranks. I think that is the smart way to do it. So far so good for North Texas. It's just a matter of what your expectations are on the football field. If your expectations are that they're not going to take much of a step back, you're going to be disappointed in 2026. They won 12 games. They're not going to do that again at North Texas, right? Not in year one of a new tenure. But if you can recalibrate those expectations and go, okay, well, if the barometer is going 6-6 and anything above that is gravy, I think North Texas can hit the ground running and do that with what they've been able to put together on the offensive and defensive side of the ball through the portal. My main question is just going to be what happens at quarterback. And again, that's probably not going to be something we know about until August.
Who were some of those coaching staff hires you were really excited about?
Well, I think Ray Gates is the one that pops off. Having the knowledge or the understanding. And he's pretty close with Chris Gilbert. Neil Brown was from their time at Texas this last year. And I imagine that was a Chris Gilbert type of suggestion, right? And anytime these coaches come in and they can find a high school coach from the area or somebody with great ties to that locale, especially in a metroplex that, produces as much talent as DFW does, I think it just showed a good understanding of how to navigate within the state, how to navigate in that region, and how to go, get not only players, but coaches who can align with that.
Well, Ray Gates, I know he's familiar with the area being from North Crowley, but he's going to have to go on discoverdenton.com to find out what to do in Denton, America. So, guys, when you're heading to Denton for game day, make it more than just 4 quarters of football. Make it a weekend to remember. How about that? Discover Denton's vibrant downtown square, amazing food scene, live music every night, and hotels that put you close to all the action, whether it's mean green football or just a Texas getaway. Denton is where hip intersects with historic. Ooh, I like that. Hip with historic. Plan your visit now at discoverdenton.com. All right, we got 3 more teams, Craven. Rice is in at number 11. Scott Abel entering his second year, went 5-8 the first year, got in that bowl game because of the APR. Shout out the academics at Rice. Do you have faith the pass defense can improve? Because I think that's the big question for me coming into year 2.
It needs to, for sure. And, I think they're another team that did a good job kind of mixing in some P4 talent that maybe weren't getting the snaps that they wanted, like a Caden Vermoss with, some G5 and FCS talent that, has produced and has played a lot, like AJ Brown from UAB. And so they bring in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new defensive backs. And so you're going to throw numbers at it and just hope you find 4 or 5 guys that can really play along with, the guys who are already on your roster. So, for John Kay, you're going into year 2 as the defensive play caller. He's been on that staff for a few years now. That roster up and down. I would imagine the secondary takes a step forward, and I would think the offense does as well. Even losing your quarterback Chase Jenkins to Kansas, Ja'Cory Brown from UCF, not a prolific passer, but he doesn't need to be in that offense. You bring back your leading rusher. So the marker year 1 was to make it to a bowl game. They were able to do that even at 5-7. Now it's posting a winning record. I think that would be real growth for the Owls, getting to 7-6 or 7-5 in the regular season and getting to a bowl game, maybe getting to an 8th win. Somehow getting over 500 for the first time in a while would be really good, a really good marker and growth for Scott Abel in year 2.
Over 500, the barometer of success. What is the barometer of success for Sam Houston, Craven? They come in at number 12 on your power poll. I know this is, again, so hard to do in January. Context matters for the record, of course. But is it like 4 or 5 wins? Is it bowl game? Where's your head at?
Yeah, I think if you can double your wins, that's probably a solid season. I think if I'm a fan of Sam Houston, though, it's always going to be get to a bowl game, especially in Conference USA. Like you see the upward mobility and the ability to go from, kind of the cellar dwellers to a bowl game or even to compete for conference championships. Sam Houston did it themselves from 23 to 24. They went from a bad team that started 0-9 to a team that won 10 games and was a win away from playing for the Conference USA championship, getting to a bowl game. So, you don't have the excuse of getting hired late and being a couple weeks into the portal. You don't have the excuse of not having a home stadium. Like some of the, and excuses are probably the wrong word. They're reasons, right? Yeah. You don't have those reasons going into year 2. You had a full cycle of recruiting. You had a full cycle of transfer portal. You're going to have your second spring ball, your second summer workout. Like there's going to be continuity there. You're at home again at Bowers with it finished in the fall. So, I think getting to 4 wins is the baseline, but getting to a bowl game is probably the goal within that locker room and that coaching staff and within that fan base.
What do you think is the portal strategy? What do you think of the portal strategy, I should say, now that Longo has had a full transfer portal cycle instead of getting hired 2 weeks into it?
Yeah, I mean, they signed multiple players at every single position except for running back and quarterback. And so, that probably suggests where they think that they're strong there at those positions. And it's about, surrounding Landon Locke with some talent. I think, Kylan Barry Johnson from Wisconsin is the upside. Kamari Maxwell from Austin P is the production and kind of proven from a smaller school. And you go down the list of Sam Houston transfers, and it's that same story. If you look at each position, there tends to be a couple that are from the P4 ranks that you're betting on the 4-star potential that they had to get to an NC State or an Arizona or a Houston or a Rutgers. And then there's other guys that are from College of Idaho or FAU or Western Carolina, Concordia, that Delaware State, Brian Bates, the linebacker, really good player from Delaware State. Like there's a good mixture of betting on the upside and then betting on the production being able to carry over into the lower FBS level. I think that's the right way to do it. That's how Texas State's attacked it. I think it's a good way to go about it if you're a G6 program.
All right, last and for now least on the power poll, it's number 13, UTEP, the Miners. Craven, we had a YouTube short come out. Shout out Sam for cooking those up for us in the studio. And it was saying that Scotty Walden, sorry. Scotty Walden is on the hot seat right now going into year 3. Scott Abel, he's got some more time here. But look, it hasn't been pretty in the first 2 years of the Walden era. And then someone commented on the YouTube post, hiring Timu Kingsbury was a bad idea from the start. Ouch.
Yeah, it's an important season, obviously, for UTEP. Not only is it year 3 because I think year 3 is, unless you have the money of a Texas or, nowadays like a Texas Tech and stuff like that, like you have to still do it relatively old school way through recruiting, through the portal. You're not going to be able to retain talent as easily, right? Like people are going to be able to afford your best players once they break out. So, I don't think it's really fair to judge too much before year 3. Well, it's year 3 and you're 5-19 overall, 4-12 within the conference. UTEP fans are finally getting their wish of getting to the Mountain West and playing some helmets that they recognize from the early 2000s when they were good in Conference USA. It's just been, it's been 2 or 3 generations since they won a bowl game, and so they're just waiting for something to be good. I just, I don't know. I don't know about UTEP. Like they have a lot to get better at. EJ Colson from Incarnate Word is coming in to be quarterback, but it's not like Incarnate Word was great last year. They missed the playoffs and had one of their worst seasons under Clint Killow, or since since Eric Morris turned that program around. DeVorce Jones coming from Missouri. He's a UTEP or an El Paso native, so that's a fun pickup. Like what they did along the offensive line, but a lot of question marks for UTEP. There's going to be a lot of question marks going into the year. I don't know what reasonable expectations are for the Miners right now, but they need to be better and they need to win some football games. And Walden needs to prove that this tenure can work.
What have you made of the transfer portal strategy? I know you mentioned DeForest Jones and Colson, from Incarnate Word, but overall, what do you think of the way Scotty Walden's trying to build this team through the portal? Because I know they got hit too with their roster.
Yeah, they definitely got hit. I do think the offensive line is probably where the biggest drop off has been from the Dana Dimmel era. Like if there was one thing Dimmel's teams were going to do, it was going to produce offensive linemen. Like they had some transfers like Florida State, some big time programs. They were always really good, the PFF grades, that kind of stuff. Like they just haven't moved guys around. That's made the short passing game be way too part of the offense. You go 3 and out, moving that fast. Now the defense is on the field for 40 minutes a game. And that's just kind of been the story for UTEP. It's turnovers, lack of time of possession, lack of sustained drives. And I think a lot of that is down to the offensive line. They signed 5 new offensive linemen, and one of them from North Texas, but the rest of them have played, from Livingston College, Texas A&M, Kingsville, Cornell. And so instead of going and getting those big time bodies that maybe made it to the P4 and just didn't break into the lineup, instead of going that way, the way Texas State did or the way North Texas has, it seems like UTEP is leaning on the non-FBS players. And that's where Walden's from, Austin P and East Texas Baptist, that kind of stuff. And so I think that they're scouring those ranks to see if they can find guys who can play, who they feel like are more known commodities that can come right in. And we'll see if it works. But a lot of this is going to come down to, can EJ Colson in the quarterback hit? Like if he's a better player and improves the quarterback position, maybe UTEP's got a chance to compete for a bowl game.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see, but I guarantee you we're going to guess all offseason about how it's going to look and provide some takes and make our predictions and go out on a limb here, Craven. Anything, though, before we head on out of here for the week? Anything we didn't cover?
I don't think so. It's the end of January, so the brain starts moving towards magazine season. Going to start diving in really on the rosters and what they're going to be. And so, it's that time of year where you kind of get out of the season, you're in a fog for a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get to around Super Bowl time, and it's like, oh man, it's time to start getting excited about 2026. It's going to be hard to match the year we had in 2025, but I think at the top of the power poll, we can see that we have, 3, maybe even more than that, CFP contenders, and there typically is one that comes out of nowhere and surprises us.
No one else cares about this, but I am personally so excited that there is no spring transfer portal window for our magazine and for print media, because that thing sucked for the magazine. You do your magazine visit with the schools and be like, talk about a player that's going to be a big time contributor. You write that thing out and then, he's at Florida State. actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had to play coy because they didn't want some of that stuff out, before the portal closed. I mean, there will be some transfers. Like there's some litigation. I'd imagine there's some legality there that I still don't know how they enforce it.
Oh, they can't enforce anything. So
right, because you're a student, so like you can just unenroll and then enroll into a new college, and who's going to stop you from doing that? You're not an employee or anything. So I don't think it'll be as impactful to us. But yeah, that is a nice thing, and you don't need two windows. Like there's not two drafts. There's not like there should only be one window of player movement. I still think it should be in the spring instead of in January, but the coaches disagree, and they typically get their way, and then they still complain about the sport and how it's set up.
A never-ending cycle, Craven. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast. For senior writer Mike Craven, I am Carter Yates signing off. Until next week.